Hello, hello. Welcome to this week's episode of Behind the Workflow. My name is Simona Costantini.
And I am Tally Mallow.
And today our guest is Ben Albert. And Ben and I met, I believe it was Podfest, and it was a couple years ago. And I went to his talk and we talked about, he was talking about community, building relationships, I believe also memberships in some capacity. And I just remember thinking like, oh my goodness, how fantastic is it that he's prioritizing relationships because it's such an important thing. So then after we met at Podfest, we ended up connecting online on LinkedIn. And so obviously no surprise to me when I found out that he's the founder of Real Business Connections, and he's also the creator of GrowGetters Only Collective. This is a professional network and podcast ecosystem designed to help entrepreneurs, executives, and marketers learn from proven leaders and connect through collaboration. And what I love is in Ben's mission, and even when you talk to him, and you'll hear through our conversation today, is to move the needle on 1 million careers, one conversation at a time. Doing this through Real Business Connections, he distills the insights of top performers into actionable wisdom that helps professionals grow faster and work smarter. Now, you might be thinking, well, Simona, how does this relate to what we're talking about here on Behind the Workflow? But we're actually going to talk about workflows in a little bit of a different capacity today. What happens if our workflows maybe don't work for us? And how do we take that and make it into something that does? Or maybe it just doesn't, and we just learn how to adapt. But before we get into our conversation today, I am going to share that Behind the Workflow is powered by Northflow, a platform that gives creators and agencies a better way to plan and produce content. With built-in Kanban views, task tracking, and file management, it's made for people who manage multiple shows and who want more clarity in their workflow. So with that, Ben, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today.
I'm excited to be here. I think I probably need Northflow, so that's awesome.
I mean, I was thinking it, but I was like, we'll just leave that. We'll leave that for Ben. But for those who don't know you yet, can you share a little bit about you, your work, what you do, and possibly a little bit of behind GrowGetters Only, what it's all about, and how did it come to life?
Yeah, I mean, at the core, my goal is to get the knowledge, the wisdom, the ideas, the connections from the people who have it to the people that are looking for it. And the beauty is I am in the looking for it category. I am in the needed category. I believe that there isn't an end destination. We're constantly evolving, and every day I get to learn something new. So when I got let go during COVID, start of COVID, just started a new role, sales executive, corporate marketing firm, last one in, first one out. I was unemployed. I got furloughed. I actually started a local business podcast. I was a music promoter at the time, but I started a local business podcast. I called it Rochester Business Connections because I needed some. Nowadays, it's called Real Business Connections. Now there's the podcast and there's that whole community you mentioned, GrowGetters Only. And again, it's built around getting the knowledge from the people who have it to the people who need it. But Ben from day one needed it. He didn't have connections. He didn't have an audience. So I set up a podcast to learn from business owners. And as I started to gain momentum with my podcast, my personal brand, I was going to a lot of networking events and I didn't like them. That's a whole nother conversation probably, but a lot of networking events I disliked. So I just started to put on my own, and GrowGetters Only was birthed around, bringing together this community of growth-oriented go-getters, putting on networking events with speakers and networking and peer-to-peer support. And the podcast and the community have kind of built together from there. But I'm always humble to mention, I'm the student half the time learning with everyone else as we go.
That's amazing. And, oftentimes this is exactly how the most life-changing work is created, because it's built out of necessity for your own self. You know what I mean? So, and if it's a problem that you struggle with, it's going to be a problem that somebody else struggles with. Everyone wants more connection nowadays, but I think that there's also the intentionality behind it too. Like, yes, you want connection, but you don't want it in a way that is like salesy. I see so many different similarities in your story to mine, because I was also furloughed in the pandemic, and I worked in corporate communications, so a little bit different. In an
Yeah.
industry where no one was going anywhere. It was an airline. Like, who was flying in the pandemic? Like, who's flying now? No, I'm just kidding. I'm just joking. And so, it was really interesting at that time. And then when I started my business, I started going to this BNI group. And it was great because you meet other people, but then it just becomes so like it felt like bureaucratic. I'm like, oh, I feel like I'm in another corporation. Like everyone is responsible for one thing, but you have to have a role within it. And if you don't have a role within it, you're not, pulling your weight enough in it. And you have to have a referral every single week. I'm just sitting here thinking to myself, I'm like, I feel like I'm like trying to create connections for people that don't actually make any sense. And so yes, people want connection. People want to be seen and heard and understood. And also, I think they want it intentionally. What do you think about that?
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to say anything bad about BNI. They're a pretty big organization, but even when I started
I'll,
Rochester,
I don't have anything bad to say. It's more just like the idea behind it. You know what I mean? Like it was fantastic and it helped my business grow in so many different ways, which was awesome. And I loved my time at BNI. But then it became for me, it just became a lot. The busier that I got, it was just a very different thing that I initially thought. And I was like, I was here for the connection, here for the community, but not necessarily to add all this extra stuff on my plate, if that makes any sense.
yeah, so this is not a workflow conversation, but I think it's really fascinating. When I started Rochester Business Connections, my hometown's Rochester, New York, I started it because I needed connections. Very salesy, very strategic, marketing, transactional in a sense. Let's do a podcast a day. November 20th, I did a podcast a day, Monday through Friday, the whole month. So did a 22 episode launch. Then we went to 3 a week. Then we went to 2 a week. We launched a bunch of different shows. And it's because I was connecting like on steroids. But connecting isn't necessarily like, it doesn't have to be transactional. I thought I needed business connections. I thought I needed leads, but I got friends, I got mentors, and I got information that I couldn't find anywhere else. And my one issue with like a BNI situation is it feels like transactional and you're all there to make money, which is badass. Nothing wrong with that, but I don't feel connected to the people. And maybe I'm just like creative and ooey gooey and emotional, but I don't like referring someone if I don't actually feel like a deep level of trust. And there's no better way to build a deep level of trust than long form conversation that's honest, that's real. And that's why I like conversations like this.
I was just thinking that as you were saying it, I was like, wow, good thing that we have podcasting. You know what I mean? Where you can sit down and have a conversation with someone for a certain amount of time. You get to learn so much about them and have conversations that you may not typically have. And I think that you just nailed it on the head is, kind of like took the words that I couldn't quite put together is that, there is always like that transaction piece to it. And like, in some capacity, every relationship that you have in your life it brings something of into your life, right, whatever that looks like. And so that makes a lot of sense to me, so I really like how you worded that. If you think about the work that you do now and how you help people move the needle in their careers and through connection, how do you define connection in the context of professional growth?
Oh my gosh, that's such a big question.
I know, I feel like we could do the whole episode on that.
I don't know if I can answer that because you said, how do you define connection in when it comes to professional growth? But the reason it's such a big question is you can call all the people on your list in your CRM a connection. LinkedIn literally calls a friend request a connection request. If you want to go hyper tactical, we can talk business development all day, and a connection is really just someone in your Rolodex. But what I've learned over time is like connection isn't necessarily someone in your Rolodex. It's a feeling that you have when you're being vulnerable. Maybe you're being empathetic. Maybe you're coming to the conversation in a state of wonder and you're just there to learn and discover. Connection comes through discovery, not through a simple process that you can put like a 3-step process for connection. So that's why I struggle with that one because I can teach people how to have a lot of connections, business development, how to sell, make a lot of money. But I actually think true connection is that human to human experience that's very unique. It's very creative, and it's hard to define. But as humans, this is why I love like partnering with AI because my systems, like life gets so easy when I partner with AI, but nothing can replace the human experience as well. I always struggle with like defining something like connection because LinkedIn, a friend request is called a
Yeah.
connection request.
Yeah.
Every name
Mhm.
in
You
your
can also not
CRM
define it.
is, yeah. Well, the thing is, the true to me connection. I've actually been studying with a gentleman, Joe Hudson. He explains view and its vulnerability, impartiality, empathy, and wonder. And true connection doesn't happen just because they're a name on a list. It's showing up vulnerable. It's showing up
Mhm.
impartial, like willing to hear their side of the story. It's showing up empathetic and a sense of wonder, like in awe as to where this conversation will go. And I don't know if you want to go business development or human behavior, but I think it's easy to have a ton of connections and feel lonely. It's the real connections that is that heart to heart. You meet at an event and you have a great talk. And the thing is, when you develop those real deeper connections, it's so much easier to refer people, to recommend them, and when you do, people listen to you because they know that you're not BSing around. And I know you guys talk about workflows all day long, and AI and technology and workflows make life so much easier, but they can't replace that real vulnerability,
The human.
impartiality, empathy, and wonder. That's the thing it can't replace, the human.
Yes, and I love your approach because like everything really starts with the human connection, as you said. Even with the AI, one of the things that we've been trying to hold off for as long as we can, because first we want to hear like what are some of the things that you really need. We do a lot of this where we just talk to people, either like a creator, an agency owner, where we're just trying to build like that relationship with the people that we're talking to and build based on their feedback. So, like bringing that back to what we were saying, what stands out to me even more is how like intentional you are about tuning those connections into action. So it's easy to say like in the networking phase, but you building like systems. Believe it or not, it is a workflow still. Like the system that you're building is moving ideas forward. And when you think about the average podcast episode alone, that can take like 4 to 9 hours just from idea to publication, right? Like to having it live. And that level of structure becomes essential. So now talking about like your ecosystem overall, like a
Mm.
podcast, a community, the live events and partnerships, how do you actually translate that connection first, like the first mindset into system and then tools that keep everything running without you as the main person there burning out?
Yeah, so let's focus on the podcast if that's cool, because there's the podcast
Yes.
and there's the community. To simplify the community, where weallgrowtogether.com is the URL, weallgrowtogether.com. It's a school community, so I can schedule events through school. We host our events on Zoom. Let's talk about the podcast though, because it's far more robust and there's kind of two separate conversations here. Um, and if you want, I can go through all of it. I don't know how long that would take,
Yes.
but step one, people ask me, Ben, how do you find such good guests? And to me, it's not a complicated question to answer. It's because I hand select them. I am just as much a consumer and an advocate as I am a producer in the podcast space. So the way I find my guests is I see them speak at an event. I'm already connected with them on social media. I've seen that they can deliver value to my audience and I want to learn from them. So I ask people that I want to learn from to be on the show. That's to me is the easiest part. Then in my Calendly form, there's a couple things I do that a lot of people don't do. There's two added elements in my form. One is, would you like to nominate anyone else for the show? The reason I add that is because I immediately can get ideas and introductions, and intros, recommendation, referral, they're all semi transactional. everyone wants to nominate someone and everyone wants to be nominated. So even when I had no listeners and I had this small show, the more nominations I got, the more introductions I got. And whether or not they're a good fit for the podcast, I was able to build my network that way. So on the forum,
I
it says,
love
would you like to
that,
nominate
and I'm
anyone?
stealing that. I
Please
just needed to
do.
say that. Yes.
The second thing I do, I could go all day on just this little aspect of the system, is on my forum, it says, if this interview kicks butt, will you leave a review? And it's not required, but I'd say 19 out of 20 people say yes. I had Chris Doe on last year. He clicked no. He's like one of my childhood idols, so I did not care that he clicked no. But if they click yes, at the end of the podcast, and I'm jumping ahead, but this is part of why I do it, I'll actually ask for a video testimonial on the spot. Because when you send it 6 weeks later, or once it goes live 3 months later, or however long it might be, they forgot about you, they're busy, they're on to the next one. You never know. So I actually get a video testimonial on the spot because we can go through the workflow of getting the transcript, the audio, repurposing that. But in my form, I ask, will you leave a review? Because to me, that provides permission that if the podcast goes well, I can ask them for the review. So before we've ever even gotten on the podcast, I've gotten nominations and I've gotten permission to ask for the review, and we can stop there. But that's like before we even start. That's kind of setting the table.
I
Do you want me
love
to keep
that, and I'm
going or any
definitely
thoughts?
gonna steal. No, I was just get you can keep going, but I just wanted to highlight that again, that I really like that option of adding like that extra two fields in our, like whenever we're getting a guest on board it, just to make sure that they'll give us a name, right? Like a name of
Mm-hmm.
nominee someone that we could do an interview with next. And also being able to get that testimonial either like during the recording or later on. I love that. I'm absolutely going to add that to our form and our
Yeah.
overall workflow. So, with
But
that, I
Tally,
kind of have a
I wanted to add also
yeah,
just
go for it.
onto that because Northflow overall as a platform is built on community, right? It's built on talking with other podcasters and other agency owners and other creatives to help literally shape the product into what it is today. And so I just love that, just to kind of bounce off of both of your ideas. Like I love that so much because it really does give an opportunity to meet someone new that you may not know. And you really never
Hmm.
know where each connection is going to go and how it's going to continue to grow and evolve and, what can happen from there. So I really like that. So I just wanted to add that in. Go ahead, Tally.
I love that you added that on. Well, since we're on it, on Northflow, if you had like you could actually send up set up a calendar with a form, and you would be able, whenever the person fills everything out, it turns into an episode with a template that follows your workflow. So, Ben, we need to talk about that later. But I am curious, since I am on that, as you get the Calendly, they fill it out. What do you do next? Like, do you get that information put into like Notion, Google Docs? What's your actual workflow so I can learn from you what you do after you get that Calendly information for a new guest that's going to come on your episode?
I'm such a caveman, totally a caveman. So it's not going to Notion. It's not going to Google Docs. I'm not zapping anybody. I'm always here to learn. Really, what happens is it goes to my calendar and my email, and I immediately reply to I do this all manually. You can tell me if I shouldn't, but I manually reply and say perfect or perf. What this is again, maybe Ben being creative, like I'm a musician, whatever. Like when I send a message, my feeling in the moment is in that message. Not the most automated way of doing things, but sometimes I'm like perfect. Sometimes I'm like, I'm so excited. Sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, I'll see you in like 6 months. But I send a message and then I'll send like a few messages ongoing before the podcast episode, but I'm not sending them into a CRM. They're not automatically converting into a sequence. Um, Everything's going to be done manually from there, which is maybe super silly, but that's the reality of it.
I think that's actually okay though, because, you know, I would say when I bring guests on my podcast, so I think it also depends like what platforms you use, but I use Go High Level for my website and email like, system and whatever. And I think in that platform, I'm pretty sure anyone who emails you gets automatically added to like your database, like your CRM database. But I don't think that you can automatically just email everyone unless they opt in to be emailed. I've been a guest on different podcasts where they take your information and they automatically put you in a funnel and some kind of marketing funnel. I'm like, but I didn't want to be in your funnel. I just like wanted
Mm-hmm.
to meet you. You know what I mean? And so I think it's really interesting because like I'm sure maybe some people buy that way, I guess, but also I feel like, I just feel like it's like such a different business model. It works for some people, but I'm kind of similar to you, Ben. Like I don't take, guests and stuff like that and put people into a funnel and this and that. Um, I have like some things that I like to automate, but on my as it relates to podcasting show, I really don't automate a whole lot. Like I think, you know, yeah, like the booking part of it is, but everything else, there's something really important about the human connection and the human side of it.
For what it's worth, and this is maybe just me selling and communicating to myself. I know everyone's different, but when someone sends me like an eight email sequence introducing me to the show and all these different things and asking for, there's nothing wrong with it, but they like want a review before I've been on the show. I think you should be
Yeah,
asking afterwards. I
I
get a
agree.
little irritated. I don't think it's always necessary. So I just try to keep it cool and casual. Also, a lot of times I'm bringing people on that like they get paid like 10 to 50K for a keynote, so I don't want to waste their time. So I keep it very simple and concise at all times.
I love that. That's fantastic.
Yeah, and the way that I see like workflows overall is that it doesn't have to necessarily be like automatic, like where everything is just like, you do this and then that happens. It really has to do with like consistency and just
Yeah.
efficiency overall. So maybe, in cases that you're still doing that human piece manually, like you're replying to an email or sending a message to a guest that you're gonna be talking about interviewing, just being effective and like knowing where you need to go to next or where you need to go to find certain files and things like that. I think that's where the workflow comes in and not necessarily having everything automatic. So manually sometimes, like personally selecting a guest, which I want to kind of go back to that in a minute, sending that thank you email or just overall, I think that does strengthen your system because it keeps that human connection alive. Now, enough of that. Going back to what you were saying earlier, that I kind of I wanted to stop you, but at the same time, I'm like, I don't want him to lose his thoughts. But you talked about like being very selective on the guests that you have in. I'm curious to know, like, as a person, let's say I am an agency that I look for guests for my clients or just a creator who does interviews. How, like, is there like an advice on how to find the right guests or how to find the perfect guest to be on your show?
Yeah, I mean, I we could tackle this in many different ways. Um, I am a huge fan of just like your show is your asset. It's your personality. It's a reflection of you. I am a huge fan of hand selecting guests. If you can't think of 50 people a year you want to invite on, like I don't know what to say. I don't want to be mean, but like I have to turn people down on a daily basis because there's so many people I want to bring on. I am a student of the craft. So for me, this is so selfish, but it's so true. I bring on people that I want to learn from, and I just cross my fingers that the audience does too. If you want to be a little more strategic, you think about who your audience is. Who's your audience? What do they need to know? Who are you? What are you interested in? Because if it's boring and feels like work, maybe you shouldn't be podcasting. And you take what you're interested in, what your audience is interested in, and in that Venn diagram, you find the people that meet both of those needs. And, it's A great example is I had Sarah Edmondson on my show. She was a whistleblower that took down the Nexium cult. She was on the cover of the New York Times. Right over her crotch on her hip, she was branded like a horse. She was in this cult. It was a terrible experience. And this cult was being run basically as like a pyramid scheme. So it was like a pyramid scheme mixed with a cult, mixed with human behavior and coercive control, and then the leaders like trying to set up a harem. It was crazy. What is this doing on a business podcast? Well, it's teaching you the red flags. It's talking about human behavior. It's talking about the bravery it takes to leave an organization that's toxic. So was it a business episode? Kinda not. But I found a guest that's business adjacent that met all the things that I was interested in and made an episode that ended up being one of our most popular ones. I had someone hypnotize me on the air. That's not real business connection talk, but she hypnotized me and prepped me for a keynote. Like, the audience
What?
finds that fun. Yeah, so
That
I
is
just
fun.
find
I want to go listen to that one.
So that's my tangent, but I always try to find people I'm interested in that I actually think the audience will like as well.
I love that. I think that's so key. And I think from like a guest point of view, so I don't do a whole lot, like, I mean, on Behind the Workflow, we do guest interviews, but on one of my personal podcasts, it's a podcast about podcasting, and like I could bring on all kinds of different people to talk about podcasting, which is great. But I stopped doing guest interviews because you kind of listen, you figure out what your audience likes, and so on. But on my other show called Happiness Happens, which has been on hiatus for like a million years, I'm just kidding. It's been since like August of 2024 that it's been on hiatus, and I'll bring it back in 2026, which is awesome. But you know, I used to have like the best conversations on there about life, about happiness, about purpose, about joy, about anything. And I think that there's a lot of power in that. Um but I think that type of show also, I don't know, I feel like if your message is clear and you're clear about what it is you're talking about, and it makes it easier for people to be like, yes, I want to be a guest on this podcast, because they know exactly what the show is about, what it stands for, what's the mission of the podcast, and
Yeah.
and so on. And so you talked a little bit about the actual guest workflow of the podcast, but what about the other pieces to the show? So we talked about, before we hit record, you're like, I don't really think I have the best workflows. Like you're like, I don't know that I have them optimized in all of the quote unquote best ways, if you even want to say it like that. So what do you do for the podcast after, you hit record? Do you have a plan that you kind of follow when you market it, or, what does that look like?
We do so much stuff. We could
That's
do
good.
like multi-part episode. The one thing, and I won't name drop a bunch of brands because I don't know if they're competitors, this or that, but I use a tool. So we record the episode. Then my videographer turns it into a full version. Then we actually audio level it to make sure it sounds good. So we edit it video only, then we audio level. The way we get the audio is just extracting the audio from the video. Then we have the full rough draft. Then we take this full rough draft and we upload it into a clip tool to get shorts. Generally, that'll produce 10 to 20. There's a little manual editing on the shorts. I don't like to post them if they're poorly framed and bad captions, so we do a little editing. We have 10 to 20 shorts. And while we're editing the shorts, we're actually looking for clips that we're going to use for the trailer. And I'll go through this quickly. We could go really deep on this. But I'm looking for a hook, a rehook, value, and an ending suspense. So a hook is something that grabs your attention really quick. A rehook can either be completely unrelated or related to the first hook and is just a second attention grabber. The third clip is value, and it's maybe a longer clip that defines a concept. A lot of people just use the value. They don't do the hook, rehook, value, suspense, but it's just something that adds value real quick. And then the final clip, I like to end with something generally emotional. Like I was looking at the gun in my cabinet and then it moves and that creates a trailer. Hook, rehook, value, suspense creates the trailer, which is going to open the podcast. So we do the full episode. Then when we do the shorts, we identify clips for the trailer. Then we resize the shorts to be full screen, create the trailer, edit the trailer, then we cling the trailer to the full episode, and that basically is what creates the episode. So in the process, we got the shorts and the trailer done efficiently. And this isn't actually done. We'll use AI to create the shorts, but the trailer, the editing, this is human editors because I mean,
Mhm.
I'm very confident. I love my team. The quality is super freaking good. The problem is we can't just record and ship it, but the quality of the product's pretty badass, which is a good thing.
And how do you guys communicate throughout the process? Like, is it through email, Slack? How do you guys keep that? Make sure you're not missing any feedback overall.
WhatsApp.
Oh, okay. I use WhatsApp. But I'm here thinking, like, how do you keep track of all of it and all the status just on WhatsApp?
Each client has their own chat, and then you can
Okay.
upload a drive, timestamp edits. But basically, WhatsApp is
Okay.
the easiest, simplest way. Again, it's not the best way. I'm not going to come on your podcast and argue I'm doing anything the best. But what we do well is focusing on creativity and human behavior.
Yes.
And that's why I like tools like Northflow as a concept, because I feel like if I could partner my visionary brain with someone who is good at operations, I'd be like 6x better. So I don't know. I'm just being self deprecating, but it's true.
No, I think you kind of have a
No.
point there, though, too, because if I look at, the way that Tally and I both operate, Tally is so good at systems and workflows and mapping it all out. And, it's interesting. Like, I feel like I am also in certain capacities. Like, ask me to map out your podcast launch. Done. No problem. I've got a system for that. Ask me to manage your podcast on a weekly basis. I know exactly what needs to get done. But, sometimes to create, and I was having a conversation with one of my, a client this morning about this, that sometimes, when you are so visionary in that way, the little tiny details are not first thought. They're not like, you don't think about them right off the bat, and you're like, I just know it's going to work, and like I know it's going to be fine. But then also, especially when you're doing a co-hosted show, there's also the piece about making sure that you have, and like kind of needing to have a process where you can communicate with, between the two people. I think it's important. But Tally definitely keeps us on track in that way. That's for sure.
Well, okay, so let's say real quick, just enough about workflows just for now. But I am curious about the other part of your business too, because
Hmm.
I really love community and like networking and all of that. And I know you've done it intentionally, like how you set up your network. So I'm curious on like overall, like how, like if somebody was to either start a new community for their podcast or they're just trying to get involved in different communities, what are like some of the advices? I guess I'll put advices just because I know there's a lot that could come out of this that you would give. Like, should a podcast always have a community not like attached to it?
I will say a community attached to a podcast is a very simple call to action. 100%, because it's, hey, if you love this show and you love my guests, join this community because other listeners like yourself are a part of it. And our guests actually participate in the community as well. So this is another, how do I select? So, well, I could get really nuanced and complex with this because at weallgrowtogether.com, we put on 3 complimentary events a month. So if you're in my community, you can attend any of these 3 events. And we do free workshops, one-offs. I give out like discounts to tickets, like all of it's in that community. We also have an inner circle, which is more of a deeper, more hands-on mastermind. So networking and basic like meet each other connection events, that's all complimentary. But if you want hot seat coaching, deep level workshops, more peer accountability, and what we do, a big part of what we do in the community is ask me anythings with world-class speakers. And people are like, wow, Ben, how do you find such good guests for these Ask Me Anythings? It's really simple. They've been guests on my podcast. So let's say, I'll just use Simona as an example. So I have her on the show. It goes amazing. 6 months down the road, I might be like, hey, will you do an Ask Me Anything on podcasting and systems for the community? And what we do is we do a private Ask Me Anything. I record it and I actually edit it and redistribute it as a podcast episode. So I got her on the show. Then she came on a second time to do a private Ask Me Anything. By redistributing it as a podcast episode, it's kind of like a micro advertisement for the inner circle in itself. It comes out 90 days later, so they didn't get to be a part of it and they got to see it later. But if you want to actually be a part of it and be a part of the Q&A live, you join the community. So it's all like cyclical working together. Like, the people I invite into my community are guests. The people in my community are audience members. We're all growth-minded go-getters. We all grow together says it all. We're looking for collective impact. We're looking to grow together. So everything I do on my podcast and my community work hand in hand. And I'll be the first to admit, like, it's a lot of work. But if I had a music community and a business podcast, it would be 3 times the work. Because they're both the same audience, I think it's a great strategy. And more than anything, unless you're already a major thought leader, like already crushing it, you want to be a member. You don't want to be Mr. and Miss Know-It-All that's just preaching all day. It's about the peer-to-peer support. It's about being a member, being a guide, being a facilitator, rather than just a talking head. Because unless, again, you're a celebrity, no one wants to hear you yap for an hour every single week. They're there for the collective support.
That's so funny. I instantly my mind goes to so many like different client shows we've produced in the past where people are like, I want to be like so and so, like whatever podcast name. I want to record for 2, 3, 4, 5 hours. And I'm like, no one's gonna listen to you for that long. Like, I'm like, that's so crazy. I'm like, good for you, I guess. But like, that's a very specific type of audience. But I think it also goes back to like knowing your audience, knowing your community, knowing who's listening, knowing what types of conversations people want to have and not want to have, but people want to hear. And, the types of content that you're putting out there, how is it received? What conversations spark more interest, from person to person? And so there's like that whole piece. Telly, do you have anything else that you want to add? Ben, we could talk all day long. I honestly feel like we've only scratched the surface, so we'll have to have you back
I
one
know.
day. I know. I'm just sitting here. I'm like, oh my gosh, like we got into so many different directions, but I also feel like there's so many, little rabbit holes that we could dive into. But Telly, did you have anything else that you wanted to add or any other questions?
No, I was just gonna say that I love like how the community and the podcast, it's like two sides of the same coin. And like you're not just creating content for the sake of creating content, you're actually creating a connection. So just wanted to highlight that.
Mm.
I love that.
So
Amazing.
we
Go
missed
ahead.
a lot of parts of the workflow. I'm going to add one thing that I think is so
Yeah.
simple that I add. And I actually forgot to mention this before. In my intake form, I make sure I get their phone number because when the podcast goes live, I'm not spamming people. They're busy. And if they don't reply, that's cool. But when the podcast goes live, I personally handwrite a message thanking them. And if I've already gotten positive feedback, if I have a major takeaway, if I just feel really thankful, I'll put that in that text. It's those tiny little human elements sending a thank you text, introducing them to other podcasters. The conversation doesn't end the moment we hit publish. In a way, it only just gets started.
I love that. I think that's fantastic. And you have so many little touch points that bring in that human connection, human element. And so, even just from a guesting point of view, if people think about what is their workflow that they want to implement, you've given so many nuggets of information here of just even from a guest interview standpoint, how you can make your guest feel valued and seen. And those are the most important things right from the beginning, right? Like you want people to be excited to come on your podcast. You want them to have a good experience. When I record for Happiness Happens, something that I hear all the time afterwards is, oh my gosh, that was so much fun. And like you want to create that experience for people. You want people to have a good time, but it starts all the way from like the beginning, from the outreach to their whole experience and their whole process from start to finish. So I guess before we wrap it up, if you could think of, 3 kind of key takeaways from our conversation today that you would want our listener to implement into possibly their own workflow or even in their own workflow of life, if you will, human connection, what would they be?
Okay, so you already touched on a great one, Simona. There's no such thing as too many touch points. They used to say you need 6 touch points to get a sale. I don't even know. In the information era with all the noise, more touch points is better. So there's no such thing as too many touch points. Be a student forever. Find mentors, find peers, educate for the person that you just met. Like, be a constantly evolving student of your craft. So lots of touch points. Be a student of your craft. We didn't exactly touch on this, but I'm a firm believer that there is no key to success. It's a combination lock, and all of us has a unique combination. So what is your combination? What is the perfect workflow for you? What guests are you going to bring on? Who's your client? Who's your audience? Find your personal combination, and then you'll feel like you're never working at all because you're just unlocking everything in life. So touch points, always be learning and find your combination.
That's beautiful. I love that. Ben, where can our listener find you so they can learn more?
Okay, so weallgrowtogether.com is the community. I want to invite people, if they haven't clicked like or 5 stars or left a review here yet. I mean, like, I wouldn't be here without y'all. So, like, leave a review here, show some love here, comment here. And if you want to hear my podcast, Real Business Connections, wherever you found this, just search Real Business Connections. And thanks, gals, for having me on the show. This was fun.
Thank
This
you
was
so
super
much
fun. I
for
feel like we could do a part 2, maybe a part 3 even.
I'm
I
down.
know, right? It'd be so much fun. Thank you so much, Ben, for joining us on the podcast today. Thank you so much for tuning in to our conversation. We hope you took a lot of different, nuggets and pieces of information that you can implement into your own life, into your own workflow. And I guess with that, we will see you same time, same place. Bye for now.
Bye.